when they broke in for the riots, they destroyed the Bentley that he wanted to buy. So growing up, my first car was a 560 SEC, and like every teenager does, I want to look cooler and go faster. So fell down the rabbit hole of chasing these vintage AMG speed parts, but there was nothing available. So rather than being discouraged, I ended up just following deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole, if you will, of sourcing these parts and then learning about the history and the involvement of the company, the cars that were built in Chicago originally. So AMG started off as a franchise, and their main headquarters was in Westmont, Illinois. And they would build whatever you wanted as long as you could pay for it. So they were complete, bespoke, coach-built 80s supercars. My opinion was, what do you want? You want the best version of your car, and that would be the wide-body 560 SEC AMG 6-liter with the 4-cam engine. After learning about the cars, there is some variations between the US cars and the Euro cars. And there's not really a lot of information available to be able to kind of discern the cars between them, because some of the German cars got VIN plates, and then some of the US cars, the documentation got lost over time that this was a real Chicago-built AMG, because running the VIN number just comes back as a standard Mercedes, because a lot of times they would either go purchase a car on behalf of the client, or you would send your car to them to then have the conversions done. So chasing these cars years and years, you kind of learn who the guys in the community are that have certain cars. They're known cars in the community. They're in the era of forums, the guys with the 2,000 posts on in their signatures, always documenting and talking about the cars and back and forth. There was a car that popped up years ago out of Seattle, Washington area. It was a picture of a wide-body SEC with this giant windshield banner that said AMG, and it was genuinely in a field, and it was all faded with these smoked out taillights and everything else. And talking with other enthusiasts of the mark, they were like, oh yeah, this crazy widow has it, and then she lost the paperwork and doesn't have anything, and nobody's got any of this other stuff. And it was used as a race car, but then she threw out the log books, so it kind of takes a lot of the value out of the race car. So it wanted some crazy number like $100,000 in 2010, and then a standard SEC was $8,000. So even then was stratospheric. So time goes on, and then eventually somebody in the community has the kind of motivation to get on a flight and go and purchase the car. So he goes there, he shows up, and it turns out the car is fully documented. It's got all the original invoices, every receipt, the log books, everything. It's complete, but it's really rough. Like the original brakes are removed, the harness bar is gone, and it's just in sad shape. So he ends up buying the car and driving it around and kind of going through it for some time, and takes it back to Chicago. And this is probably in 2012, 2013-ish era. So he drives around for a bit and is kind of one of the known guys on the forums, but doesn't really divulge much about the car. And then all of a sudden he's getting on later in years, and he has some health issues, and then the car stops running. He's like, cool, well, I've had enough, I'm done with this mark, but the guy really dedicated himself to it. So it's interesting to see he just got so fed up with the whole thing, with the frustrations of these cars, that the guy that went to meet with Alfrecht had a meeting set up in Monaco. He's just washed his hands of the whole thing. Like, I'm done. I don't want another one. And you've seen that multiple times within that community. They're that frustrating that people will sell the cars and just wash their hands of them. So it was 2020. The world has gone into lockdown, and it's around March or so we start talking a little bit more about actually getting serious about wanting to sell off all of his cars. And there was the wide-body SEC in non-running condition, and then there was a green 500E and an SL60 AMG from Japan. But the wide-body was the big gem. So going forth, I was attending school in McPherson, Kansas, in my automotive restoration program, and drove across the country. So went to go see, driving across, and then I get into Chicago at like 3 a.m. So I get there, then wake up in the morning, head out to go see the car. We head to a suburb in Chicago, and it's this underground parking complex of kind of apartments. And it was, oh, lo and behold, he pulls off the cover, and there is this wide-body SEC AMG sitting there, but it's in real sorry shape. And I'm looking through certain checklists that I look for as just kind of having hands-on experience with these cars. The US cars got steel fenders, but the European cars got fiberglass. And that's because the AMG CEO said these body kits don't fit very well and decided to make everything by hand with English wheels back and really steel fenders and do real metal work to these cars. So I'm looking and I can see the seam welds and everything looks old. So it's all congruent back and forth. So we're looking forward and the engine's locked. This is going to be a big project, but I think we can do it. So we're looking forward back and forth. And then he's like, cool, well, you want to see the documentation? I'm like, what documentation? So we go upstairs and we're sitting down and the guy has everything. The original invoice, the original window sticker, the owner's manual, all the hang tags, the SCCA racing logbooks, and just binders and binders, original footage of the guy racing the car when it was new, the original AMG 6.0 badge where they took a 190 2.3 badge and then grafted it together with a 560 badge and then glued it all together. And you can see it's still got the part numbers the way that they would do that. But going forth, and all the original documentation is there, but some of the original components from the car were changed when they went racing. So the brakes, there was this custom AMG 4-piston caliper where they went to the manufacturer Ate and they cast their own 4-piston calipers. And it says on the AMG option list is AMG heavy-duty brake caliper option, but they're no longer on the car. So certain things got changed as the car came along, but we go back and forth and back and forth, and we're trying to see if there's any room. And then we look at other cars that are available. He has looked at the 500E, and there was some condition issues that didn't make sense for the deal, but kind of leave empty-handed at that time to go back and forth. It's like, well, this is a big undertaking, but let's see what we can do with this one. So heading back to my hotel after inspecting the SEC and kind of mentally drained from the whole experience, not really paying attention and in unfamiliar territory, coming up to an intersection. And then all of a sudden I look to my left and there's a wall of protesters that take up an entire block, and they are maybe a car's length away from me. Then I look to my right and I see a wall of police in riot and SWAT gear that are also taking up a block. And I see the armored cars and all the other riot gear is right next to me on my passenger side. Then I look over and I hear a guy yell, "Form a line, don't let them cross," in the bullhorn, and they all start to move in. So as that happens, I look at the cop and I look at the people, and all this is happening in slow motion. Then I look and I just decide to run and go for it and driving on the sidewalk. And mentally completely shell-shocked right now. Can't even look at my phone because I'm nervous I'm going to get carjacked because everyone is starting to really cross behind me. So I ended up trying to find anywhere to get me out of the city in general because all the bridges were up, so all the traffic was shut down. So as it turns out, it was the George Floyd protest, and that was the shock around the world that changed everything, kind of. So I remember standing there with the bridges up and seeing a little anarchy symbol on the traffic lights and all the bridges up and just justice for Floyd, and everything was spray painted on the sidewalks and everything. But we ended up just driving around the highway for an hour trying to figure out where to go. But all of my stuff was left in Chicago, and ended up staying 3 nights in Chicago to try to, wait for the riots to cool down so it was safe to go back and forth. From that journey and escaping with my life, I ended up working at an internship with John Tamarian down at Curated in Miami, and worked with him doing everything from sales and sourcing and trying to put a deal together on certain cars. And John took an interest in this car, and he said, let's try to chase it. Let's go back and forth. And he used the photos and the information that I gathered and kind of trusted my gut as the historian to say, hey, is this real? Is this something that we would do? And it took 9 months of back and forth with this guy, kind of, do I want to do this? And he wanted us to source a Bentley Continental Mulliner T, and a very special car, another limited production super coupe, if you will. And it turns out he knows every VIN number and cars to keep track of. And the one car that he wanted to buy, it had no history, no past, no stories, was on sale at Bentley of Chicago. When they broke in for the riots, they destroyed the Bentley that he wanted to buy as a replacement. So that kind of put our negotiations back and forth on that one, because that would have been the perfect trade for him to go back and forth. But the symbol of capitalism got destroyed in the riots. that made for an interesting challenge with that. But we ended up purchasing the car and came down to Miami, and it was really an interesting experience to share the knowledge of this car with the guys that curated, and then to go back. It is now undergoing a full restoration at Rentec, where the gentleman Hartmut, who founded Rentec, was the lead technician at AMG in Chicago. So now it's reuniting him with the car that he built in his past to be able to go through it and bring the car back, and it's going to go hopefully to a fantastic home. It's going to enjoy the history of the car.
Premier Financial Services makes it easier and more affordable than you could possibly imagine to own your dream car. Their Simple Lease is one of the most powerful tools in the world of exotic car financing. You get all the benefits like the tax savings and the low payments of a lease with all the additional benefits that you normally find in a traditional finance arrangement. You can build up equity, you can pay it off early, you can trade in and out of cars because you get a very clear and easy to understand amortization table to understand what your payoff will be any month throughout your term. And all the while, the amazing team from Premier Financial Services will be right there to help you along the way. They've been supporters of the VINwiki channel now for 5 years in a row, so we can't thank them enough for that, but mostly we're thankful for the fact that they can help you make it easier than ever to own your dream car. Check them out now.